Hey guys, welcome back to Bible in the Backyard. Yes, I am back home in my little spot on the back deck doing this Bible in the Backyard. I love it. Um, we are still with the story of David. And we're going to get into a little bit of storytelling, and this segment is going to take a hot minute because it is so involved. It's Saul versus David, and this happens throughout multiple chapters and throughout multiple times. So what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to kind of recap what we talked about because it ties into what we're doing now. So if you remember back in chapter 15, when we talked about how, or the reason that there needed to be a new king, why David was anointed king by Samuel. And that was when Saul did not listen to the Lord. He kept people alive, he kept animals alive, and he wasn't supposed to. So then in chapter 16, Samuel listens to the Lord and he goes to Bethlehem and he anoints a new one, and that's one of Jesse's sons, and his name is David. He is the youngest brother and he is the shepherd. And so once he is anointed king, then there is a troubling spirit that comes over Saul. So as soon as David is anointed king, this peaceful spirit that used to cover Saul now does not cover him anymore, and this troubled spirit comes and covers him. And then he is asked to find someone that can play a harp to help heal his troubled soul. And so now, then they go and find, of course, David, who Saul necessarily doesn't know that has been anointed king. And so David goes and plays for Saul, and then goes back home, and Saul and 3 of David's brothers go off to war with the Philistines. And they go off to war in chapter 17, and that's when Goliath enters. Goliath is a giant, and he necessarily wanted to defy the armies of the living God. Not just a person, not just this, not just that, but basically everything that God stood for and what he fought for and what the Israelites were fighting for. That one person, that one giant, and his army defied all of that. So David went back home and listened to Jesse, and Jesse says, go and take these things to your brothers and go and take their oath and join the battle. So David goes and he hears Goliath's challenge. So David questions, he's like, why is everybody afraid? He's defying God. He's defying the person that is the most important and the most powerful. So, of course, David ends up getting Saul's armor. He takes it off. He doesn't use it because he hasn't proved them. And then he goes, picks 5 smooth stones out of the brook. Comes down to the Philistine when he comes back into the valley in chapter 17. And ends up killing the giant with a sling and a stone. And then Saul asks, who is this? And David answers, he's like, your son. He's the son of thy servant Jesse of Bethlehem. And that's in verse 58. And we pick up, of course, that'd be a wonderful ending to a wonderful story, right? Yay, the battle's over, the armies fought, Israel won, ta-da, ti-dee-ti-do. It's over and done. However, there's more to the story than just David versus Goliath. Which, we could end there, but there's also more to this story than just that one thing. So we're going to start in chapter 18. And we're going to look at that chapter and a little bit of chapter 19. So in chapter 18, verse 1, and it says, "And it came to pass, when he had made the end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day, and would let him go no more to the home of his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and to his bow, and to his girdle. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So David went to go live with Saul. He was great in battle, so Saul, of course, set him over the army, and sent him off to battle. Whoever and whatever needed to happen. In verse 6 it says, "And it came to pass, as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out in all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him, and he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. What can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day forward." So as soon as those women said, "Oh, Saul has killed thousands and David his 10,000s," he immediately got jealous and was like, "This can't happen anymore." So in verse 10 it says, "And it came to pass on the morrow that an evil spirit from God came upon Saul. And he prophesied in the midst of his house, and David played with his hand at another times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand." So Saul was really, really, really troubled. He was almost mad. He's like losing his mind. He's losing his consciousness. And so David's playing the harp, trying to soothe Saul. In verse 11, and it says, "And Saul cast a javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. And Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, and he was departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from him, and made him his captain over 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely all the ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore when Saul saw that he behaved himself wisely, he was afraid of him. But all of Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them." So he was the one that they saw the most. Going out to battle, coming back from battle. He was the one that David was the one that the people saw, instead of King Saul. So Saul has a plan. "And Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter Merab, her I will give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, Let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And David said unto Saul, Who am I, and what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" So he questioned Saul. He's like, "This is my humble background. Are you sure you want me to be a son-in-law to you and be part of the royal family?" But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel the Meholathite to wife. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. So Saul's second daughter loved David. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the twain. And Saul commanded his servants, saying, Commune with David secretly, and say, Behold, the king hath delight in thee, and all of his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. So Saul's trying to persuade David to become his daughter's husband. And Saul's servants spake those words in David's ear, and David said, Seemeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and lightly esteemed. Again, going back to his humble upbringing and his humble background and ancestry. And the servants of Saul told him, saying, On this manner spake David. And Saul said, Thus shall ye say to David, The king desireth not any dowry, but 100 foreskin of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. So, thankfully, David was like, I can't be your son-in-law because I can't give you anything of worth. And so Saul's like, no, you don't have to do that. I just need you to go and fight these Philistines and then come back to me and bring proof. But really, Saul's real intention was for David to be killed. In verse 27 it says, Wherefore David arose and went, and he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men. And David brought their foreskins, and they gave him in full tale to the king, that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal, his daughter, to wife. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was yet more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass, after they went forth, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by. So in verse 28, it kind of sets the tone, and it says, and Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David. So he finally acknowledged the fact that there's a higher power behind David, and I am terrified of that, because Saul was like, well, if the Lord's with David, then he can overthrow me at any time. And of course, no king wants any battle, any argument on who should be king. He doesn't want any enemies or anybody coming to overthrow him or prove to him and say to him that, oh, I'm supposed to be this person. And so Saul had it in his mind that David was going to do that. He was going to try to overthrow Saul, and David I don't think had any intention at this point to do any of that. That's the end of chapter 18. I'm going to go into a little bit of chapter 19, but not a ton of it. Again, Saul is terrified of David. It says in verse 19 and verse 1, it says, And Saul spake unto Jonathan his son. And remember, Jonathan and David are like best friends. And to all his servants, that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul my father seeketh to kill thee. Now therefore, I pray thee, take heed to thyself until morning, and abide in a secret place, and hide thyself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in a field where thou art, and I will commune with my father of thee, in what I see, and I will tell thee. And Jonathan spake good of David unto Saul his father, and said unto him, Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he hath not sinned against thee, and because his works have been to thee word very good. For he did put his life in his hand, and slew the Philistine, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all of Israel. Thou sawest it, and didst rejoice, wherefore then wilt thou sin against innocent blood to slay David without a cause. And Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan, and Saul sware, As the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan showed him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence, as in times past. And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines, and slew them with great slaughter, and they fled from him. So basically what that was saying, and whatnot, Saul again tried to tell everybody that he was going to kill David. So Jonathan goes, warns David, says, Go hide, I'll come back and get you whenever I talk my father down. So he spent the time basically taking Saul and basically pulling him back from the edge and saying, Why are you going to kill David? He's done nothing wrong. He's done nothing wrong to you. Don't kill innocent blood. He's been good to this country. He's been good to you. Let's keep him alive. And so Jonathan goes back and gets David and brings him back to the house, or back home and into Saul's house. So that's the start of David versus Saul. And I wanted to get that because I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this story and see where this continues, and see how David reacts to Saul's advances and how Saul reacts to his own decisions. But yeah, that's it for today's Bible in the Backyard. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, evening, morning, wherever you are, and just have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye.